it comes under part 1 preliminary. It says, recognition is given to the fact that management in its exercise of its function needs to use its resources, material and human, efficiently. Recognition is also given to the fact that work is a social right and obligation. It is not a commodity. It is to be respected, and duty must be accorded to those who perform it, ensuring continuity of employment, security of earnings, and job satisfaction. Now, this code, colleagues, is often used by unions or industrial relations consultants when they go to the Ministry of Labor for one particular reason mainly, because there are times when the employer believes that they can simply just sever the employment relationship with that individual or terminate them without following due process. I'll say to you, you must be guided by your policy on one hand, and of course by the relevant labor laws. And if you realize, colleagues, this particular code says that work is a social right. What does that mean? What is a social right in this context? What do you think it means? Let me ask Angela, what do you think social right means in this context?
It applies to all members of the quote-unquote working society. So it's a human right in a sense.
Very good. So it's like a human right or a constitutional right. So essentially, right, all persons of a certain age have the right to work. And the code also speaks about the importance of ensuring continuity of employment, security of earnings, and job satisfaction. So the idea that you can simply terminate somebody without adhering to certain policies or principles doesn't hold, all right? So when you get the labor code, you can read the section further on this particular matter. Now, on this slide here, I'm sharing with you some relevant documents that you must peruse if you intend to terminate an individual. So for private enterprises or companies, you must, of course, consult the public service regulations. Mute your microphones, please, colleagues. Mute your microphones.
No, man, guess what? I was on my computer.
That's Carol. Right, you must consult the Public Service Regulations Act if you're public. If you're public, you must also consult the disciplinary policy for public bodies, the staff orders for the public service, and of course, the Labor Relations Code of 1976. All those documents come into play. Right? If you're private, of course, you must consult the Employment Termination and Redress of Payments Act of 1974 and the Labor Relations Code. But there are two things missing from this slide, colleagues. What are they? Just should you consult if you intend to terminate somebody? What two documents are missing from here?
The labor laws?
Not necessarily the labor laws, because the ETRP, the Employment Termination and Redress of Payments Act, is a labor law. But there are two critical documents missing from this slide. Doreen, you want to try?
No, I don't.
Doreen says no. All right, Shani, what about you? Do you want to try?
Because the thing about it, because I wasn't prepared for this course, I'm just sitting in until my manager gets in.
Okay, that's fine. Let me ask, John, do you want to try? What is missing from this slide here?
Honestly, I'm not sure.
All right, so let me share with you guys. You want to also ensure that you consult your company's disciplinary policy and procedures. That is critical because your policy and procedures will be guided by these relevant documents. You also want to ensure that you peruse the individual's contract of or for employment or their job letter to see what it entails. That's also critical. Good. So if you haven't perused the relevant documents here, you need to start do some reading because they're extremely important. Because there are many cases where one of two things happen. The company drafts a contract which violates one of these particular policies or legislation, or in some cases, their disciplinary policy and procedures violates one of these policies and policies here, or the ETRP as we call it. So you want to ensure that you have the relevant documentation in place and you peruse them before you attempt to terminate the individual. And I'll say to you that more so, even if at a particular point you have the right to terminate based on the infraction committed, if you violate any of these doctrines here and the matter goes to the Ministry of Labour and Social Security, you may lose that case. This is the harsh reality of it. Any questions? I see something in the chat. Hold on. Okay. Any questions? So continue the Labor Relations Code. Part 222(2)A says no worker should be dismissed for a first breach of discipline except in the case of gross misconduct. Good. So this is essentially, colleagues, that your policy should have, disciplinary policy should be progressive in its design. So you're going to have infractions which are deemed to be minor offenses, serious offenses, and very serious offenses. Very serious offenses are deemed to be gross misconduct. May I get some examples of what this means, some examples of what may be classified as gross misconduct? Could you share some examples with me? Stealing may be deemed as gross misconduct, yes. Anything else?
Fighting.
Fighting, very good. Fraud, good. For some organizations, if you misrepresent the organization, or if there's an unauthorized movement of company property, those may be deemed to be gross misconduct, sexual harassment. But I'll say to you that for both private and public organizations, you must make it very clear in your policy what infractions are deemed to be gross misconduct or very serious offenses. You won't capture everything.
The exemptions then when
Caroline, your
exemption
microphone
when it
is
come back.
open. All right, good. So your policy must make it very clear what infractions are deemed to be gross misconduct or very serious offenses. Now, the 22(2)A is important as well, colleagues, because it is saying to you that for minor offenses and serious offenses, the attempt to penalize should be progressive. So for minor offenses, as you should know, there should be a particular trajectory moving from a verbal warning to a written, to possibly a final written warning or suspension, and then the hearing and termination, whatever it is, right? For serious offenses, from a written warning to a hearing to a suspension to possibly a hearing to dismissal. We want to ensure that your policy is progressive in its design. I've seen cases, I'll speak to you soon, John. I've seen cases where the policy moves from a verbal warning to a suspension. We want it to progress in a gradual manner. It shouldn't jump from a verbal warning to a suspension, or from a written warning to termination. That's not progressive. Good. So I want to ensure you're clear on that particular point. Also, please, before I forget, even if you identify infractions which are deemed to be gross misconduct, ensure you convene a disciplinary hearing, just to protect the company and to give the employee a chance to voice their perspective or to give their defense on the allegation or charge. Right? John, is it John? Go ahead.
Yes. In the issue of gross misconduct, so a case where an employer has conducted or committed a case of what we consider to be gross misconduct.
Yes.
You ask the person to show up for a disciplinary hearing, say the following week. Person doesn't show up. What options would you have therefore if there's no hearing? Person does not show up for a hearing.
Very good.
Would that case be treated?
Very good question. I'm going to get there, but I'm going to answer you, John, since you asked the question. No. So if you follow the correct steps, because as an employee, you have the right to convene the hearing at a particular time and date. You will set the date and time. You will also communicate this date and time to the employee, the accused employee. Now, this is my advice to you, and listen carefully, colleagues. If they don't show up the first time, I'll say to you, reschedule. Make every effort to communicate or contact the employee a second time and reschedule the hearing. If they don't show up, you send a letter outline this is going to be the last rescheduling of the hearing. This is at this particular date and time, and they're expected to show up. If they don't show up, you proceed with the hearing itself. Now, for some organizations, they will have it very explicit in their policy that the company is going to reschedule up to 3 times. Some policies say that it would be good if your policy states that clearly to the employees, because they will know that once you go beyond the 3 times, then the hearing is going to proceed. All right? And John, your question is very important because I know cases where the employee, a particular employer, has made every effort to contact the employee. They call the employee, WhatsApp them, email them, they sent the invitation for the hearing letter with Tara. And when the employee realized what it was, he said he didn't want the letter, he sent it, didn't take it. He refused to accept the letter, which would invite him to the hearing. Good. So in that case, you proceed without the employee being present. However, if the employee is unionized, I'll say to you, be very careful. You must communicate with the union. Good. And I'll say to you, wait for a response from the union before you proceed with the hearing itself. So for unionized organizations, it may be a bit more meticulous for you to deal with these matters because you may be busy or they have other things doing. They may take a very long time, but I'll say to you, do not proceed without consulting with the union itself. Because they're the ones who are going to provide representation to their member or the employee at the hearing itself. All right? Am I clear, colleagues? Are you following?
Yes, following.
Yes. Any questions on that point? Or comments?
Dr. Marsh.
Yes, Sharon, go ahead.
In relation to the disciplinary procedure, yes, the disciplinary, the grievance procedure.
This is grievance going into now.
Pardon?
You're going to touch grievance today?
I'm just asked. I didn't hear the statement.
All right, go ahead, you may ask. It's a separate question because you're going into grievance now, which is a totally different question.
Oh, okay, okay.
So
that will be a part of your discussion.
Not
grievance.
really. No. But go ahead and let me see.
Okay, I'm looking at the terms and conditions of employment for the non-teaching staff, and he says that all workers have a right to seek redress for grievances relating to their employment, but the procedure should be followed. In fact, the stages with the first stage with the work, and then with the supervisor, it goes to another stage where it may go to the board of management. If it's not, then it goes to the ministry and so on, to the industrial relations.
But remember,
I'm
Sharon,
just looking at the stage.
grievance is different from disciplinary. So you have a disciplinary procedure and you have a grievance procedure. So they don't work together. So the grievance procedure is for the employee when they believe that there is some situation or issue which has caused them to be aggrieved. So it outlines the steps to be followed. Discipline, however, is a particular process which is initiated by the employer when there is a violation of company policy. So they are on 2 different spectrums.
Right, I'm just saying one will follow the other.